Rachel's career, initially commencing in the Royal Navy, moved into technology before becoming a currency trader. She later returned to technology as a senior manager at Microsoft, working on the very first Xbox, where she won multiple awards. Rachel then resumed as an investment banker, where she worked in the US, Ireland, and Switzerland, and as an advisor on banking transformation and strategy. Rachel is currently the CEO and president of a US-based management consulting organization, and away from her day job, Rachel is a leadership mentor to the CEO of Finite Reflection Games in the US and a member of the management team at Formula One racing team. Finally, Rachel is also a fellow of the Chartered Management Institute and a public speaker on intersex inclusion in the workplace. Rachel, it's an absolute pleasure.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for hanging on. I appreciate you've had a really busy couple of days. You've probably had death by PowerPoint, and you've probably heard that I'm an investment banker, so guess what? I've got more slides. But what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to try and skip most of the slides, because I've kind of gathered as I've spoken to people before coming on stage that you're really not that interested. That what you're really interested in is a little bit about what it means to be intersex, what it means to be transgender, and some of the challenges that we faced. I am going to do some of the brief. That's why they've asked me to come along today, but I'd rather we got a little bit more personal. So, the first thing I want to talk about is relax. You will get it wrong as you go through your experiences with intersex, transgender, non-binary people. We all get it wrong. I get it wrong on a daily basis. I see this stage as a bit of a minefield because I'm always afraid of what I'm going to say next. And am I going to say something that is going to potentially offend somebody? The reality is, the answer is yes. You will. It's okay. It doesn't matter. So please, as you get to meet people such as myself, accept that you're going to make the odd mistake. It really is okay. If you don't mind me asking, just before we carry on, is there anybody here that's actually not had a conversation with somebody that's transgender, intersex, or non-binary? Is there anybody that's brave enough to stick their hand up and say, this is the first time? Thank you. I appreciate your honesty. Not many hands, which is quite unusual. Normally when I do these things, it's a sea of waving hands. It feels a bit like a Coldplay concert. But not as bad, I promise you. I'm not a Coldplay fan. So let's do the reason why I came here first. So gatekeeping. And I'm not going to read what's on the slides behind me. I'm assuming everybody's okay. If there's anybody that's dyslexic and can't read, my apologies. Stick your hand up and I will read it out for you. But otherwise, gatekeeping. So gatekeeping is something that, let's call it the gender variant community face on a regular basis. Access to healthcare. It's something that is a real challenge. It's a perception a lot of the time that everybody involved in the health service is part of the problem. And I want to explain a little bit about this and why this matters. But before I do that, I just want to go through a few basic definitions. And I don't know how many of you are aware of this, but we try and break it down into three key components. And that is a person's sex, their sexuality, and their gender. Sex is immutable, as we say. You are born, on the whole, with male or female chromosomes, physiology, etc. There are exceptions to that rule. I'm intersex. And what does that mean? That means, in my case, I was born with something called mosaicism. My chromosome pattern is not just XX or XY. It really is a bit of a car crash. That's probably the easiest way to describe it. What happens is, in the womb, in the very early days, when the genes start to split, something goes wrong in the pattern. Normally, you're fairly lucky. If you're XX, as the gene splitting takes place, it follows a fairly defined pattern, but it doesn't always happen like that. But so sex is really our physical being, if we think about it. Our sexuality is completely different. Our sexuality is more about who we are emotionally, intellectually, physically attracted to. The two are completely separate. Gender nowadays is the complicated one. We all hear of things such as non-binary, etc., and we all get a little bit confused about it. We tend to view gender as a social construct. So what does it mean to be male? What does it mean to be female? That's a really tough question, because it matters to different people in different ways. It depends on your culture. It depends on your history. It depends on your personality. The easiest way I try and describe this to people, and it sounds like a strange comparison, but it's Santa Claus. Santa Claus, as we know him, we see him on the TV, we get our little Christmas cards. He's a nice little, fat, jolly little fellow in a red and white suit. Santa Claus never used to have a red suit. That's the fault of Coca-Cola and their marketing campaign. So as a culture, we've grown to learn that Santa to us means red and white. If you go back in history only to the early Victorian days, boys wore pink and girls wore blue. At some point, that switched over. The clothes that we wear. Why do we wear these clothes? I look in the audience, I see plenty of gentlemen wearing ties. Doesn't make any sense to me. Not picking on you, don't worry. But ties are kind of, it's a social thing. It's symbolic of what it means to be a man in the workplace. I really am sorry, you're looking so awkward there. I'm not picking on him. So wearing trousers, wearing a suit, wearing a dress, this is something that society has imposed upon us. So when we talk about people that are non-binary, we're really talking about the gender aspect. And that is that they've chosen not to conform to the rigid ideas of what a man looks like, what a woman looks like. And all of these are a spectrum. So at the very hard, I struggle to say hard left, hard right nowadays, especially in this political climate. It has so many different meanings. But on the one side, to be a man, we all think we know what that is, a big muscular, big muscles, etc. Whereas a very feminine male, you all have your ideas. So gender really is something that we need to think about. When you meet non-binary people, all they're doing is they're challenging the social construct. I am not going to go through this slide, don't worry, there's way too much information on there. The reason why it's up there is really just to indicate that there's different considerations that we have. And you can see some of the averages and some of the extremes. Essentially, the reason why I've labeled this lies, damn lies and statistics is we don't actually know. We don't know what percentage of the population is gay, is transgender, is intersex. We have a reckoning. That's the best we can do. There may be somebody in this audience today who's gay and hasn't come out. And if you ask them, they would say they're straight, even though they are gay. So trying to draw up accurate information in terms of what this means from a population point of view, it's actually really, really difficult. They're more educated guesses than anything else. But you can see from the slide behind me that there is quite a variation. Some of it's quite shocking. Just over 50%, for example, believe that transgender is a natural occurrence. When I saw these figures, it was quite surprising to see Spain as the most accepting, Hungary really as the least. You'll notice on these figures that there's nothing really here from the UK, and that's because we don't undertake much research. We don't really ask the questions, so we don't really know. So, why is this relevant to the health service? I went out onto the internet the other day, and I had a look at the current waiting list at one of the gender identity clinics. So when people identify that they're gender questioning, they may be thinking about transitioning from male to female, and they approach their GP, which in itself is a bit of a challenge. If they're referred to a gender identity clinic, there is an awfully long waiting list. As of May of this year, the Gender Identity Clinic in London was seeing people that were first referred in January 2018. Now, if you have what's known as gender dysphoria, sitting there waiting to go and talk to somebody knowledgeable about this and to start talking about the options, if you're waiting for 4 years, that's a real problem. The suicide rate amongst the transgender population in particular currently sits at 41%. 41% of the population at some point try and take their own lives because of the discomfort of trying to carry on without the help and the support. As medical professionals, and apologies, I appreciate you're orthodontists, so I'm putting you in the same bucket as GPs, etc. You're therefore seen to be part of this structure, this hierarchy that makes it difficult for people to get access to healthcare. What does that mean? That means that people aren't going to come forward. They're not going to come and talk. And if they do, they're probably going to be a little bit reluctant. They may come with a bit of an attitude. They may be very emotional, very upset. The reality is, the way the world is nowadays, and the fact that people are coming out more and more, this is something you're going to come across. So understanding what people go through is really, really important. If you imagine that you have a medical condition and you know it's going to take you at least 4 years to go and talk to somebody about it, it's really tough. If it's as fundamental as who you are, how you fit into society, what your role is, how you see yourself, how you interact with the world, to sit and wait for 4 years just to go and talk to somebody for the first time is really hard. When you go and get to see somebody for the first time, quite surprisingly for some people, your second appointment is typically another 18 to 24 months away. So despite what, and I'm going to say the Daily Mail tell us about how easy it is to do this, it's actually really difficult. It is very slow. It's fraught with difficulties. It's very slow. It's very painful. And people don't make it through the process. I'm in the unfortunate situation myself. I know people, and I've mentored people that have given up. And unfortunately, in this community, giving up often means ending their lives. As a community, the gender variant community live under a great deal of pressure, a great deal of trauma. So it's important to try and understand what they're going through, how they're feeling, and really how you can help them. So therefore, you're guilty by association. Now, we all know you're not involved in the process, but you are, as I mentioned, going to be seen by those that aren't totally aware. You're seen to be part of that process, the medical system. So you, to a certain extent, to them, will represent part of the system that they're fighting against. Doesn't mean you are, it just means that that's the perception, and unfortunately, perception, as we all know, forms reality. So what's it like to be gender variant? I'm going to try and leave the slides almost at that. There's a lot more, like I said, but you're all looking a bit tired. You're all looking like you've seen way too much information. Some of you struggling to stay awake, and I get it. After 4 days of listening to people talking about teeth, believe me, I would be in that coma by now. So, this is me. A bit of a potted history. That's me on the top left. I was adopted as a young child with my 2 sisters. Quite a weedy little kid. Didn't know why at the time, but yeah. As I grew up, on the top right, I went and joined the Royal Navy. I knew there was something wrong in me. I didn't really know what. I knew I didn't really fit. My adopted family have a military background, and I felt that that was the right thing to do. So off I went at the young age of 16, because I just needed to get out there and try and do something to try and prove that I fit into society as a male. I joined the Navy, and it was good fun. I went to the Falklands, I went up to Norway, I got to travel the world, but I was doing this all the time, knowing that I didn't really fit. I left the Royal Navy after an accident, and I was medically retired, but that wasn't enough for me. I knew that I didn't fit, that somehow I knew I had to find a way to be a male. So you can see in the bottom left, there's another picture of me in an army uniform. So I went and joined the reserves as an instructor. They allowed me to become an instructor. And this particular photo is really important to me, because this was taken on Dartmoor on the military training exercise. A couple of hours later, I got myself all kitted out in my camouflage, picked up my weapons, and off I went to be a little action man. Only it all went wrong during that exercise. All of a sudden, I fell critically ill. I was rushed away from that military exercise and taken to Exeter Hospital. Didn't know what was wrong. Things were clearly in a bad state in my reproductive area. I was rushed into theatre and came out, found myself in a little room on my own with people outside the door, and nobody was allowed to talk to me. Eventually, the doctor came in and spoke to me, and he told me something that was really, really hard to hear, given that I'm trying desperately to be an alpha male. He told me I'd had a mini hysterectomy. I had an ovary inside me that had burst, that I wasn't in fact male, that I was something else, I was intersex, that I had the reproductive organs of both a male and a female. Bit of a shock. So what did I do? They asked me to leave the military. That's the way it was in those days. It wasn't something that they could accommodate. And I had to accept that. The alternative was to fight the system and go to prison, because that's what the military did. I decided, however, as you can see from the bold chap in the center there, to carry on as a male. The doctors told me I'd be better off as a female because of how my reproductive organs were, and I decided no, because of my anatomy, my voice, my face shape, etc., that society would be more welcoming if I carried on as a male. And I did. And I struggled. I fought. I had nervous breakdowns. I lost marriages as my wife found out that I was intersex. But I carried on because of society. Remember, we spoke about gender and the gender expectations of society. Here's just a little slide about intersex. Intersex it's an umbrella term. Roughly 1.7% of the population, they say, and again we go back to lies, damn lies and statistics, roughly 1.7% of the population fall under that spectrum. Most people never know. But intersex is incredibly common. There are as many people with green eyes today as there are people that are intersex. So what does it mean to me? I mentioned that I was adopted. I lost my family, my adopted family. They turned their back on me. At the age of 48, I was working in Switzerland, and I fell ill. I had a stroke. Years of fighting what the doctors were telling me to do had taken its toll upon me. I was pumping testosterone in faster than a bodybuilder. I was doing whatever I could to try and look masculine. I abused my body just to try and fit society's expectations. As I went through that, the sense of rejection I got, not just from my family, but from my old work colleagues, from some of my friends, led to a great deal of shame. A lot of people undertook something called gaslighting, and gaslighting is where you try and blame the victim for your attitude. If it's not a term you've heard of, it's something that's worth looking up, because gaslighting is something that an awful lot of people do, and it can cause an awful lot of damage. During the process, I lost my career. I was an investment banker, and you can boo and hiss because I was a Swiss banker as well. I got paid an awful lot of money to make a lot of money. It really was tough. I lost my career, everything I'd worked for. I found that when I went and spoke to people, I was no longer taken seriously. I was a freak. I'd lied. I'm not who they thought I was. I found that society didn't want to know me anymore. So I'd gone from being this alpha male, as far as everybody was concerned, certainly a successful banker, and all of a sudden, I didn't belong. I didn't belong anywhere in society. Nobody wanted to help. I remember talking to a bank about a job, and the recruiter turning around and telling me, "We don't hire people like you anymore. You're too much trouble." Throughout my life, and I've tried in the past to come out as intersex, as female. And every time I've done this, I've suffered verbal abuse. I suffer verbal abuse on a regular basis. I've been put in hospital more times than I care to remember because people react badly to people like me. I've had my jaw broken, my arms broken. It just goes on. Ribs, nose, you name it. Why? Because I exist. It's really hard. I find, and you can hear my voice, I accept how my voice sounds. So when I talk to people, it's surprising how often I get called sir. Yeah, if you look at my passport, you look at my NHS records, it's female. I am a woman. I know I don't always look like it. I know I don't necessarily sound like it. But I am female. Yet every time I go on the phone, there's that risk of humiliation. When I do these talks, I find it quite difficult. I walk out, and every time I see a brand new face in the audience, I realize I've got to come out again to somebody new. People talk about coming out as an event. It's not an event. It's a lifelong process. It's something I will be doing until the day they stick me in the hole in the ground. It's an inevitability. It's something everybody in my situation, whether intersex or gender or transgender, is going to face. We have to come out every day for the rest of our lives. I was going to wear a different dress today, and I changed my mind because I went to a famous high street store. I said I wouldn't mention their name. It sounds a bit like Zorro. For those of you that like shopping, you probably figured out who I mean. And I bought a dress, and I'm stood at the till waiting to pay, and the cashiers turned to each other, and one of them said, "Is he buying that dress?" This was last weekend. I'm stood in a shop full of people, in a queue with about 20, 25 people in. Everybody in that queue heard that insult. Is he buying that dress? It breaks my heart when I get that. But do you know what? You have to carry on. There's no getting away from it. There's no avoiding it. There's no switch. I can't go back in time. I wouldn't want to go back in time. So it's something I've learned to accept. It's a process. Acceptance is a long, slow, painful process. There are times when I do struggle with it. But I've got a long way to go yet in my life. I'm going to have to face the medical system, the system that you all represent to a lot of people in my situation, and it's going to be hard. What's it going to be like when I'm old, when I'm infirm, and they want to stick me in a home. What kind of a home are they going to stick me in? How are they going to treat me? How am I going to be abused? I don't bother hiding the fact, obviously, I'm sure you've all gathered, I'm bald. I wear a wig. So I'm going to be left, probably sat there, bald, looking like a man again, because society doesn't know how to deal with people like me. I've attempted to take my own life 3 times. The last time was about 2.5 years ago, when I came out and decided, with the help of my surgeons over in Switzerland, that I had to go and do something about this, that if I didn't come out, if I continued to live as a male, it would kill me. And I came out, and my family rejected me. That was tough. It was tough when I realized that they'd known all along. I thought I was good. I thought I'd lived with this secret, the fact that I was intersex. I tried to keep it from everybody, but they actually knew. The gaslighting, the shouting, the accusations got too much, and I tried to take my own life. But it wasn't the first time. But it was definitely the last time. Why? Because I'm proud to be intersex. I'm proud of who I am. I'm proud to stand up in front of you and talk about what's going on in my life. This is the way I was made. It's nothing to be ashamed of. It's something to be proud of. It's a privilege. I get to stand in front of you all today and talk about what it means, in the hope that when you meet somebody like me, you might just remember this speech. You might think about what I went through, and you might just show that little bit of compassion that person needs that day. So I am proud to be able to make a difference to other people as well. So I'm just going to do a couple of very, very quick slides, and I'm not going to read them out for you. There are clearly okay questions, things you can ask. Nobody has a problem with these. There are some sensitive questions. And why are they sensitive? And that's because my journey to this stage today is exactly that. It's just my journey. The fact that I'm comfortable standing up here and talking to you is symbolic of me, nobody else. You can ask me. You may not be able to ask other people. So if it's a sensitive question, just be aware of the person that stood in front of you. There are definitely no questions. Asking people, have they had surgeries? Are they going to have surgery? How much did it cost? What did you used to be called? These are all no questions. It's a bit like me looking at you as an audience, and excuse my bluntness, but if I ask every male in the audience to put their hand up if they've got a penis that's more than 3 inches long, you're all going to sit there and start feeling a little bit uncomfortable. I'm looking at the audience. There probably wouldn't be that many hands going up anyway, so we're okay there. But it's that type of emotion. You just don't do it. It's really something, just think, don't do it. So, I lied. It was a nice short deck. I decided to be kind. I looked at the agenda and realized you didn't want 136 slides full of statistics, boring stuff, etc. You've had enough people doing that to you over the past couple of days. So, has anybody got any questions for the last 1 minute and 48 seconds before they kick me off the stage?
Rachel, thank you so much for such a thought-provoking presentation. We do have a question.
Rachel, there's obviously, very sorry to hear some of the difficulties you've had to face throughout this time. We've got a lot of interest about kind of transgender and non-binary patients presenting to our clinics, particularly with like orthognathic type issues. One of the things that's been asked is, do you feel that lockdown has had an influence on people's confidence in kind of effectively identifying as trans or non-binary, for example?
That's a great question, and I think lockdown has it's kept people at home. What it's done is it's put people in front of computers. It's given people the opportunity to become educated. So people that were questioning something about themselves, they've got the information to hand that they maybe didn't have at some point in the past. What it has done, though, is it has caused problems. The clinics were closed, the list got longer. So the frustration has got worse. The pressures have definitely got worse. People's mental health as a result, because they are transgender, is definitely worse than it ever was.
Brilliant, Rachel. So thank you so much for your presentation, and on behalf of the Society, we just want to give you a small gift as a token.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. No problem. Thank you. Thank you.